Thank you. Yeah, so we have our guest speakers with us today, and we are going to start off with a land acknowledgement, and then after that, Darcy is going to open us up in a good way.
Thanks very much, Carolyn. It's my privilege to do the land acknowledgement today. My name is Shannon Neufeld, and I'm a colleague of Carolyn's at KAIROS, working on the Jubilee campaign. I grew up with serviceberries. We called them Saskatoon berries, far better than blueberries that I only knew out of a can, sweeter than choke cherries that grew in our yard. Just the joy of summer. I remember as a camp counselor teaching young campers on the banks of the North Saskatchewan River to find the Saskatoons and fill a bucket and bring them back to the camp kitchen to clean and bake a pie, the best dessert ever after a day on the land. And so today I want to acknowledge the land, the rocks, the loam, the peat, the sand, all those soils. Acknowledge the water of the rivers and the aquifers and the oceans and tiny drops of rain. Acknowledge the air we breathe, just the perfect amount of oxygen. Without any of these, there'd be no life. I acknowledge the plants and animals that share the gifts of land, water, and air, our elder brothers who can show us how to live in balance. And I acknowledge the first peoples of this land, who knew those lessons of the land and water, plants and animals of Turtle Island long before my ancestors came here. From Europe, from Germany, via Russia. In particular, I acknowledge the young Chippewayan First Nation, who listened to the buffalo, who picked the Saskatoon berries for millennia before my ancestors settled on the banks of what some would call the Omakatai in Blackfoot, or in Cree, the Kissisikkasiwan, Sippy, swift-flowing river, what I called the North Saskatchewan River. I also acknowledge the treaties. Treaty 6, where my parents were born, Treaty 4, where I was born, and Treaty 13, as some would call it, where I live now. I am an inheritor of these treaties and of the two-row wampum belt and the dish with one spoon wampum belt that speak to me so strongly of what it means to live in relationship, in reciprocity and respect, just as we are learning that the serviceberries or Saskatoon berries also can teach us. I acknowledge today the people who are in relationship with this land where I sit, the Huron-Wendat, Batoon, Seneca, and Mississaugas of the Credit. All my relations.
Thank you, Shannon. Over to you, Darcy.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the land acknowledgement, Sharon. Much appreciated. Turtle Island has so many amount of things to provide for us, and you kept it very well. This is a blessing of this event. I want to do it in my Anishinaabe language. Anishinaabe is mostly in northern Manitoba and also northern Ontario. It's a mixture of Cree and Ojibwe mixed together. So we kind of borrowed both languages and kind of put it together. And it's a dialect. Some Ojibwe's do understand us, but they can not converse, but they do. I mean, if we could proceed to bless, and that we can be able to listen and be able to provide good insight. And I'm hoping that everybody can get away with something from what we want to talk about today. We do the work we love to do, and we'll continue doing. So if you can join me. cemento gine ka gente with gerechtigheid uno no kumaga episode pendo sian uno question no tagdian question mo yang mo ka go we to the man mo be ba question one uno to gante he mo ya che uno bakane un teazo we kenda mo acho mo do na ta regular ko speak yo kana wa jo which one samando with mission and with the whole miigwech miigwech. Thank you very much.
Oh, miigwech.
Oh, miigwech.
Yeah.
Robin, Darcy.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to start my presentation here. And share my screen. Okay. Okay, so thanks again for joining us tonight for our final session of the webinar series. Tonight, we are exploring innovative economies, not just new methods of trade or technology, but ways of rethinking the very purpose of an economy. What is it for? Who is it for? And how might it reflect our deepest values? To do this, I'll be weaving together the wisdom of three sources: the Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer, the ancient biblical practice of Jubilee, and our guest speakers are going to provide the third source on social enterprise and that kind of approach. So together, this will offer us a vision of economies rooted not in extraction or accumulation, but in relationship, reciprocity, and restoration. In the Serviceberry, Robin Wall Kimmerer asks, what if an economy was rooted in gratitude? Drawing from her Potawatomi heritage, she describes the Serviceberry tree as a metaphor for a gift economy, where abundance is shared, not hoarded. This tree gives freely to birds, bears, and humans alike. It doesn't demand payment or interest. Its fruit is not sold. It is offered like a gift. In this way, she invites us to think about relational economies, where value comes not from scarcity or control, but from relationships of care and reciprocity. Kimmerer contrasts relational economies centered on kinship and responsibility with transactional economies, which rely on separation, anonymity, and competition. In relational systems, what matters most isn't profit, but connection. You don't just take from the land. You ask, receive, and give back. Responsibility is part of any relationship. You're not just a consumer. You're a participant in a living system. The question becomes not what can I get, but what can I give in return? So maybe I make a berry pie and happen to have one too many. So I store my berry pie in the belly of my neighbor. Sure, I could freeze it and save it for winter. But when I send food next door, it's sure to return. For me, that's usually in the form of spaghetti with extra meatballs and cookies for my dog. The biblical practice of Jubilee, described in Leviticus 25, is a bold vision of relational justice. Every 50th year, land is returned to its original caretakers, debts are cleared, enslaved people are freed, and the land itself rests. Jubilee restores balance between people and the land and redistributes resources so that no one is permanently left behind. It confronts the human tendency to accumulate power and wealth at the expense of others. At its heart, Jubilee is not about charity, it's about justice through relationship between creator, land, and neighbor. Robin's Indigenous worldview and the biblical Jubilee both reflect a sacred economy of reciprocity. The land is not a commodity, but a relative. Abundance is meant to circulate, not concentrate. And every member of the community, human and more than human, has a place at the table. Jubilee's theology of restoration and Robin's ecology of kinship offer surprisingly aligned visions, life-giving economies where relationships, not profit, are the bottom line. We often separate Christian theology from Indigenous worldviews, but here's a challenge. What if, at their best, they echo each other? Robin speaks of the land as teacher, as giver, as sacred. In the Bible, the land is also sacred, created good, and placed under human stewardship, not domination, like we mentioned last week. The Jubilee reminds us that the earth belongs to Creator, not to us. The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. With me you are but aliens and tenants, from Leviticus. Both traditions call us to humility, interdependence, and responsibility. So here's where the three sources are going to align. The Serviceberry has a focus on sacred reciprocity. Jubilee is about restoring right relationships. And then we have an army of problem solvers, or a social enterprise model. And it's about redistribution of resources and power. And we'll actually hear a little bit more about that in a second. But together, these three call us to reimagine economies as relational, where we can collaborate and work for the common good of all people. So none of these visions are passive. Jubilee requires action from everyone, landowners, debtors, workers. The Serviceberry economy depends on people choosing to give, not hoard. So the next time we have a crisis, make sure you share your toilet paper. And then we have our social enterprise, which demands bold public investment in people who've been sidelined. In all three, the invitation is the same. Will we participate in an economy of relationship and restoration? Innovative economies aren't about novelty. They're about returning to ancient truths, that land and people are not separate, that wealth must be shared to be life-giving, that restoration is possible if we have the courage to act. And that's why I have the bear up here to remind us to be brave. As we now turn to our guest speakers, Elder Darcy Wood and Sean Loney, I invite you to listen with your heart. What would it mean to build a new economy, not with the tools of domination, but with the wisdom of Serviceberries, the hope of Jubilee, and the courage of problem solvers? All right. I'm going to pass it over to Sean and Elder Darcy now for their presentation. I will start your PowerPoint presentation.
Well, just leave us up here, the two of us, for a bit.
Okay, sure.
Awesome. Nice to be together. Understand there's folks from across the country and a few south of the border. It's wonderful to connect. And Darcy and I met in 2013, and I'm going to get him to tell you a bit about that. But I had been working at a social enterprise called Build, BUILD. And if you're in it hires gang members, people with criminal records to work in the trades. If you live in Toronto, you might be familiar with Building Up. In Saskatoon, Build Up Saskatoon. In St. John's, Newfoundland, Impact Construction. In Barrie, Ontario, Community Builders. And they're all working in an urban context. But Darcy and I met in 2013. And we have Darcy. Actually, I haven't seen Darcy for a while because we both retired from Aki Energy a month ago, maybe.
Around there, yeah.
Yeah.
That's over.
And I just wanted to share a bit of a story that he and I have done quite a few workshops across Canada over the years. And one day we both showed up wearing the same shirt. There's a Aki Energy shirt. And Darcy was quite concerned that people wouldn't be able to tell us apart. So Darcy, 2013, tell us about Aki Energy. You named it. What does the name mean, and what does it do?
Okay, so yeah, let's go with why Aki. what we call it Aki. So basically, it comes from our language. As I mentioned earlier, we kind of mixed together the two Crees and Ojibways. Like they're called in their own language, Anishinaabe and Mornegum and Inuit. So they have a word. So we pronounce it Aki, means the ground, depending how you use it, or earth. So in our teaching, so Aki is like our Mother Earth. It provides us all the items that we need to be able to survive this planet, and also kind of falls into the land acknowledgement. So that's the Aki, the sharing of that. So just a little quick lesson on the Cree. Cree has, they pronounce their earth or dirt, depending how you use it, ASCII. And on the Anishinaabe or Ojibwe, it's Ak. So we just kind of borrow those, but we kind of pronounce that of the ASCII. So ASCII is what pronunciation for the human language. So that gives you an idea. So they also we'll get into it. So with geothermal heat source heat pumps, we basically quickly we're using the heat from Mother Earth to heat our homes and also to cool our homes, and that's part of the reason why we call that key energy. And also kind of goes hand in hand with that key food. It's mostly about growing food on First Nation, not only First Nation territory, but providing other affordable food for individuals that can't really afford it. So when we met, I was, I guess I've got to mention that I was also chief for one term in my home community. But after that, I went back. I went back to what I know, Leah. I'm a policy analyst by trade, but that was my what I did, and mostly in the area of housing or infrastructure. So, and I was working with our political office with the Assembly Manitoba Chiefs as the housing policy analyst. And in around 2012, we were advised that there was a change in government, federal level, where we needed to cut down. So my position as a policy analyst, so I had a choice of either stepping away or I could stay on for 3 months. And then around that time before that happened, I had met Sean. And I went and met him in the Social Enterprise Center. And we went for lunch next door at a hotel that since burned down in the North End. And I decided that why I think I should have stayed longer, because we had this idea about installing geothermal heat pump in communities, which we eventually did. We had another third individual. Her name is Taylor. Came from. She came from. She came from. Lived in Peterborough from Green Communities Canada, and she did get some. Green Communities Canada got some grant money from the federal government to provide some ground source heat pumps. And then I think Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're part of the board member of Green Communities Canada. But we met up, and this is what we had thought. And then I went sent out notices to Sullivan First Nations, And I got about 6 good responses. At the end, we were going to pick one community. At the end, we picked 2 First Nations. If you look at the at the map there, in the pink area code area, is Fisher River, Cree Nation, and or Peguas First Nation. We picked those 2 together, and we.
And before you go on,
Yeah.
Darcy, just while you're talking about Fish River, some of the folks on the screen will know that that's where Stan McKay is from, a former moderator of the United Church.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, thanks for, yeah, so we did that, and then, during those 3 months I was getting ready, so, then we did, formalize and create and make sure that we are, have a social enterprise company's office. Just normally when you start up a business, you provide your constitution, bylaws, and company's office. We did that, set all that up, and at the same time, we devised how we can be able to engage with the committee with our constitution or bylaws. I modeled this entity into what we called in federal government language. We needed to be a band-powered entity. Band meaning the First Nation. Band-powered entity, the organization, which basically means that we were the First Nations that we work with, they become the board members, and they assign a board member in our board of directors. And then there's a lot of quite a bit of integral parts, such as we needed to have the First Nation approve our budget for the upcoming next fiscal year. So the First Nations that we work with have a say on what Aki Energy did or does. And we eventually expanded to just on the southern part of Manitoba, 2 more First Nations, Saugeen First Nation, and also Long Plain First Nation by Torres del Perry. And we also added Sioux Valley Dakota Nation recently, so that's not low. But we also did other work, such as on a comprehensive community plan. There's the part of the comprehensive community plan that we need to do. Communities need to do an energy plan. So we worked with 4 First Nations on developing those. So 3 most northern communities you see up there, where there's 2 Dene First Nations there, and 1 Cree. Northland, Tlasini, and also CSA Dene, and Brochet First Nation. And in the middle of that map is Cross Lake First Nation. So we did work with those and provided community energy plan. So that's an overview. I don't know if you want me to get into on the.
No, that's excellent. I might just describe for everybody a bit about, in Manitoba, we call these renewable energy ground source heat pumps. We also call it geothermal, so we use the terms interchangeably. But in Manitoba, really freaking cold in the winter, and very hot in the summer. So ground source heat pumps work better here than maybe more moderate climates. But this is Trevor, our coworker, and they're in the process of putting the loop 7 feet below the ground where it's not frozen in the middle of January or February. And there's fluid circulates through the loop and it warms up in as it goes out, and there's heat taken out of the fluid in the winter, and in the summer there's heat taken from the house and dumped into the ground. So everyone's house is you can see bill reductions fall in half. So if your bill was something like $4,000 a year, you could expect to pay a couple $1,000s a year. And Carolyn, you can advance to the next slide, please. Darcy, do you want to explain this slide?
Yeah, this is what we in Northlands. We bid on a project. I believe it was a $15 million project to install alternative sources of heat and energy. So there, we designed. We can only design, and then it goes for a bid because it's through the government. So we designed a part of the design included a biomass system using the labor and the wood out there. It's every time there's a forest fire, we harvest, or the community harvests the logs, and they keep it so that they can be able to use that fuel to heat the ground storage heat pump. I mean the biomass. So the biomass basically heats the school and other larger buildings. Then we also had a cluster of buildings by the shore. That's what you see there. There was about a mixture of 15 buildings, a mixture of residential and probably about 3 commercial buildings. And it's a district system. So what they're doing there is they're laying out all the loops, and they're going to put it in water, and what they're going to do is that they're going to have those loops before they fill with that mixture of fluid, and then it goes out to the shore. I don't know, can't remember exactly how many feet out from the shoreline. And when they fill those loops, fluid in there with some kind of alkaline mixture, and then they sink it to the bottom, and the mesh metal thing that you have, they anchor that thing right in the bottom. And then each of those 15 buildings, depending on what the heat load is, then they have their own individual heat pump. And as a backup, the backup is backed up by the biomass system.
So you can jump to the next slide, Carolyn.
Yeah. So just to finish up on that other, we also did an array of solar panels, which it's a diesel community, and they had to do integrate the solar panels into to the diesel generator. That was a project we did.
So Aki Energy, it's a business, but we're in the business. I like how you said that, Carolyn. Love and compassion are embedded in the business model. It's not something that's separate. And I came across a diary of an Indian agent from 1905 named William Graham. I don't know if any of you are from Saskatchewan or from the Qu'Appelle Valley, but he operated in the Qu'Appelle Valley in 1905. So I have his diary, and he talks about this moose hunter that goes past his house and comes back later in the day. And William Graham, the Indian agent from 1905, goes and talks to the moose hunter and says, "No moose today?" And the moose hunter says, "Yeah, I got a moose. It's back in the bush." And then about 20 minutes later, he sees 15 Indigenous women go by, and they take the hide off the moose, cut it in 15 equal pieces, and bring it back into the community and share it. And William Graham says in his diary 2 words which I think are quite interesting. He says, "How peculiar." What a strange thing, he says, like to kill a moose and then bring it back into the community and share it. But that's how the moose hunter understood that in the economies worked in his First Nation. And so Darcy and I, established Aki Energy in 2013. It's installed about 25-30 million dollars worth of ground source heat pumps, lake-based, which Darcy was explaining, biomass, and also solar on First Nations, and doing it not as projects, but rather as a business. And we were both pretty committed to training people from the communities to do the work. And so this is just an example of a Peguis First Nation in Manitoba, where we were preparing to hire people to work at Aki Energy, but also we would train them so that they knew they could become experts. Did you want to add something to this, Darcy?
No, I think we're good. Continue. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go on to the next slide, Carolyn. This is the chief of the Northlands Denisovan First Nation, and we're showing him a district biomass system. And the technology isn't all that important because Darcy and I, Aki Energy, has used different kinds of technologies, but the important thing for us is that reduces utility bills, is good in the climate, and also creates employment. But the biomass equipment is on the left, and the biomass just simply comes up the conveyor belt, drops into the fire, and the fire heats fluid that circulates through, as Darcy said, a cluster of 14 buildings on the shore at Northlands Denisovan First Nation. Next slide. So, Darcy, we should probably say, the folks might find this kind of interesting, that we had a family connection that we realized when we first met.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good place to begin with Aki Foods. I think we established that in 2015. And when we started traveling up there, we had started traveling up there, and prior to that, when we first met in 2013, Sean asked where I was from. I said from Garden Hill, and so I think in the connection or there, his connection was that his grandfather used to be the minister, church minister, Reverend Harland, and the other thing is that my mother worked with Sean's grandmother, and started Sunday school. And when they left, my mother continued doing that, and then she got older, and my sisters took over the driving force of one of my younger sisters passed on, so that's kind of fizzled. I don't think there's anything there anymore. When we did go up there, and at the same time, Sean advised me that there were some slides, and he provided some. I went to digital, and we have a community channel up there when we did our presentation in 2015 to see what we're hoping to do. And one of those trips was basically we had a pop-up market, and but more than that, with just our connection. So all the we showed the pictures of Reverend Harlan's pictures on a community channel, and all sorts of people came just to come and shake Sean's hand, and also we provided, if you want to copy these, so we bring a storage flash drive. So I don't know how many pictures it should be, but there's people there in the early 60s. In the early 60s, I was probably, um, I would say probably about 6 years old, 7 years old, but I do remember. So that's how we met. That's our connection. But they may want to add more of you met a lot of people from there. So he
Yeah.
was a hit. So anyway, yeah.
So Darcy went on our TV station and said that Reverend Wesley Harlan's grandson was here with them, me. And a friend of Darcy's came up. I'd never seen him before, and he planted both feet and he imitated my grandpa's laugh. And I thought that's pretty funny. And then he said, I owe you 2 bags of carrots. I said, you owe me 2 bags of carrots. And Darcy and I were selling healthy food at the time in this pop-up market in Garden Hill First Nation. And he says, yeah, well, the manse, there was a trampoline at the manse. And I said, yeah, I heard about that. And he said, well, the garden was right next to the trampoline. So as kids, we used to go over and jump on the trampoline and then we'd help ourselves to the carrots. So I told him, I said, I'm pretty sure my grandpa knew you were eating the carrots. They weren't stupid. And they're probably very happy that you're eating the carrots. So he says, oh, it's all okay then? And I said, yeah, it's okay. But you can go to the next slide, Carolyn, please. So when I was a kid, I remember my grandma and grandpa saying that when they left Garden Hill First Nation, that was the last garden there. And as a kid, you don't really know. I just thought it was kind of weird that Garden Hill First Nation and that there were no gardens. So, and that can be explained by these policies of forced dependency pushed onto the First Nation. But at one time, there were gardens throughout the community, and that's why it was called Garden Hill First Nation. So we formed this Aki Foods, and we we started a farm was the first thing we did. But Darcy, you can maybe talk a bit about how we set the farm up.
Yes, yeah. In our in the website, in Nike Foods website, there is a short film. I don't know how long it would be. What 10 minutes? It's called the Medium Project. You can find it on any YouTube. Kind of tells you a story of how we ended up. Called a farm, but it's called Farm in a Box. We call the Farm in a Box. Yeah, and then we that one winter we shipped everything up, but then it started building. We had already established Aki Foods, had our own board of directors, mostly from our Aki Energy board, so that we can be able to start functioning right away. But we eventually had our own First Nation northern communities from there. So we did hire this farmer uh, from I forget the southern Manitoba, western part of southern part of Manitoba, and he went up there. He was with us for 3 years, just training kids. To the left at the top were just 3 individuals there. They're holding turkeys. Those are some of the students that worked there. And at the same time, we were working with each First Nation has a Aboriginal diabetes initiative worker. And it so happened that they were promoting backyard gardening, chicken raising. So this is so they're familiar with it. Our hope and idea was that if we can get those students thinking about growing plants, vegetables, raising chickens, and they have that skill. And we're still in operation doing that. Our director, Rodney Comtois, is a hard worker, and he's been providing what's necessary, what's needed up there. We started with a simple trailer, a feed can, loaded whatever is needed there. Also a tractor and all that. When we first advised the community we want to go there, so said we know where to go. So they immediately on their own got and cleared some area. It was a burned out area in that area. But them being so eager, they kind of scraped the limited topsoil we have. So part of our challenge was to create soil using the peat moss there, and also providing so we can do fertilizer. So, so that's basically how we started doing that. We're still doing a little bit of public markets and also ordering healthy food so that we can be able to ship it to individuals, and we're doing that as well at that point in time.
Great. Yeah, next slide, Carolyn. We had a bit of an issue in that the kids were bringing their parents to the farm. It kind of turned into a tourist attraction. And the kids wouldn't eat the damn chickens because they were too cute. I think they've got over that now. But what's cool about the chickens is that they would be roasted. The chickens would be roasted, not deep fried. But the Northern Store is a big monopoly retailer operating in many First Nations, including at Garden Hill First Nation. And they import chickens, which are heavily subsidized by your taxpayer dollars. And they are deep fried and put in a KFC box and sold with French fries laced with gravy. All of it is subsidized by your taxpayer dollars. And the chickens you're looking at here are ineligible for government subsidies because they're local. And in an army of problem solvers, with Darcy's help, I talk about there's so many things that we've come across that the government is still currently actively suppressing the reemergence of local economies. And I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. But we talk about how the government's stated policy with residential schools was to take the Indian out of the child. And we can tell you that they're still taking the Indian out of the economy by, favoring monopoly retailers, for example. And it's very difficult to make a business case out of selling food when your competitor is heavily subsidized with taxpayer dollars. The government of Canada was kind enough to tell us that if we flew the chickens down to Winnipeg and then flew them back to Garden Hill, that they would be eligible for the subsidies. So it's ridiculous. But next slide, please. Darcy mentioned that we have healthy food markets, and this kind of gives you an example. We sell healthy food boxes, and we're also running a cafeteria at a high school in Winnipeg, hiring half the staff there are we've hired a young Ojibwe man to work at the cafeteria, which is kind of cool. And we also sell healthy food at powwows in and around, in Winnipeg, and we've actually gone to one in Saskatchewan as well.
Yeah.
Next slide. So just a couple thoughts to finish up. So learning from Darcy, from the board members at Aki Energy, we realized that Aki Energy is a social enterprise, not new in terms of an Indigenous economies, but rather new, re-emerging at least across Canada. We see them as simply defined as nonprofit businesses. So you can see, charities like a food bank, for example, maybe even a church represented on the left, On the right, you might see a Walmart or Canadian Tire. This isn't, a social enterprise isn't halfway in between. It's just a Buddhist colleague of ours from Alberta talks about how nonprofits have gifts and businesses have gifts. Nonprofits have the gift of knowing how to deploy love and compassion, and businesses have the gift of being able to scale the sale of goods and services. And so social enterprises just take the gift from nonprofit sector and the gift from the business community and put them together. And it's disruptive. Some of you may have Scottish heritage. There are 6,000 social enterprises in Scotland. Half of them hire people with barriers to employment. 2/3 of those Scottish social enterprises are led by women. And you also in terms of income equality, the average CEO of those social enterprises in Scotland makes about 1.5 times as much as the average worker. And you compare that to the big companies in Canada where the CEOs will make upwards of 500 or 600 times as much as average worker. So social enterprises can be very important tools to address income inequality, gender inequality, and also hiring people with barriers to employment. And next and last slide. So Darcy was talking about the work we did in the diesel community, and just wanted to leave you with this thought that there's a lot of racism embedded in governments, and it's not. We're not talking right now about outward racism, although that still exists too. This is just racism that's embedded in how government moves money. So on the left is a diesel tank, and that holds the diesel that the government purchases, brings from Texas, ships over the winter roads, and is put beside the houses for the purposes of heating the homes. And it's toxic, it leaks, and it causes contamination in the soil. It creates no local employment. It's very expensive, and it is very high in carbon. It's a disaster. On the right is, we introduced you to earlier, is Trevor, who installs perfectly renewable, very efficient ground source heat pumps. It is way better than diesel fuel on any metric you want to talk about. Here's our point, is that every year the government puts out a tender for diesel. So it's trying to get the best deal that it can to purchase diesel fuel. And governments will not purchase things that are good. If it's good, they want to fund it. And so they've been desperately avoiding Aki Energy's offer to say, look, we know you're going to purchase diesel fuel. Why don't you instead purchase heat? Purchase reduction in carbon. Purchase a reduction in the number of people on social assistance. Purchase what you want. But the racism that's embedded in the government system is that they'll fund good things, but it's little piddly amounts of money. That's really about compliance and control, but they'll purchase what they don't want. So the shift that Darcy and I would love to see, very simple shift that governments do, is to instead purchase what they want. We had put together a plan to install 2,000 ground source heat pumps. It would have trained 100 community members, all of it saving the government a significant amount of money. And all we needed them to do was to, instead of purchasing diesel or purchasing imported electricity into First Nations, is to purchase electricity reductions from Aki Energy. And we never got there. But I think the likes of Robin Kimmerer would would want to see economies that are based on love and compassion. And there's some pretty simple tools that governments can use to make the work that Darcy and I and others do easy rather than hard, and make it able to expand to a community near you. So that's our quick presentation, and you can take the slides down, and we're hoping that there might be some questions or comments. I don't know how you want to handle that.
Yep, we can actually open the floor up to some questions. I think some people might have some questions about social enterprise and you know how that looks with regard to some of the stuff that we read in the book. And we can start off with Pat.
Where are you
So,
from, Pat?
Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario.
Okay.
I'm just curious, the government that you're referring to must be the federal government and not the provincial government. Is that right?
Well, referring to it in terms of them refusing to give Aki Foods incentive for the chickens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a government of Canada, but here, I mean but it's pervasive through all levels of government. If you, for example, we have this an amazing Ojibwe premier in Manitoba, wild
Yeah.
canoe, and the last provincial budget at $1 million for social enterprises, and some insane amount of money for increase to the justice budget. And what we've been trying to tell governments, whether they're provincial, federal, or municipal, is that why don't you, right now you have, with funding, you have nonprofits competing with each other, and governments get proposals and then they choose the one that they want. But what was really going to change things is have solutions offered by, for example, Aki Energy or Aki Foods, and have them compete against government's current outcomes. So in the context of Aki Foods, 4 out of 5 First Nations children will have type 2 diabetes. That's insane. But governments have these little funding pots that they've got First Nations and nonprofits competing with each other to get a little bit amount of money. In some countries around the world, nonprofits are being paid for pre-diabetics that don't become diabetic. So it's a business relationship that nonprofits have with governments. So I just didn't want to say this is a unique example. It's only the federal government. It's pervasive throughout all 3 levels of government, how nonprofits are excluded from mainstream resource allocation decisions.
All right, thank you. Catherine?
I think I have my mic on.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so if I understand what your model, your design is, in terms of business, you're utilizing skills you see in the business communities, and you're applying it to social policy issues in the communities. And effectively, you're trying to suggest that values based on compassion and love and understanding the basic problems in the community should be driving the decisions that are made by governments about monetary allocation to projects. Am I getting the gist of this?
Yeah, I think you've got it. I wouldn't phrase it that way, but the part I liked about what you said is that the love and compassion when you offer someone love and compassion that's struggling, so they might be on social assistance, they might be in another jail, it works amazingly well.
Well, yeah,
And-
what I'm seeing you saying is that when you see the distributions of money, for example, they'll go to a social enterprise like a food bank or some kind of care solution, but they're not hitting the problem where it is fundamental, which is lack of resources, lack of training, lack of jobs in communities. And thus, by moving the solution to new technologies, and in some cases to old technologies like farming, you're allowing a resurgence in the community itself, which is healthy on all
Yeah,
counts.
I think
You
think
get, sorry, you teach a person how to farm rather than give them charity through tax dollars going to a mega store and asking them to take their monies and go be cheated at the store,
Yeah,
as an example.
I think you got that right. So just to maybe put some context so when the government issues allocates project dollars to First Nation communities, they do that tendering process, and it's normally so the cheapest bidder, the bidder gets the job. And once they get the job, they bring in their own laborers, and this is where we at Energy, our mandate and belief and the value that we have is that we don't want to do that. Go in there just to make money and then leave and leave nothing there. And a lot of times, I've worked with First Nations, not just in Manitoba, but I have connections with First Nations across the country, mostly remote northern communities. There's no skilled labor. There's a shortage of skilled labor there. Once you have skilled labor, you basically have better opportunities. So at Aki Energy and Aki Foods, what we intend to try and do is that we have a mandate by the First Nation. That's why we worked with them. They said they want to build capacity and the skills required so that no outside work can be able to work. So we can just draw on our own people. And that's part of the training that we did. So on the job training, you just don't, you get certification with the geothermal components of things. You get certified, it's a ruling court, and also in order to be the certified installer, you have to be recognized by the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association, certify you, which basically means that you can go anywhere in the world and install geothermal. And we have quite a few of those individuals that are certified and living in First Nations and working for. So that's we want to do, build capacity. At the same time, we're also looking at them starting their own little business, but in the model that we have, so that our business model is a thing. And another thing about the project dollars that come in, I don't know, Sean, we didn't explain our latest venture where we use financiers and hold outcomes a little bit more, a little bit different. That's how we finance them. What the work that we're doing in the energy field. I don't know if you want to have a quick explanation on that, Sean.
Well, it might complicate things a bit, but what we
Yeah.
could say is that Aki Energy and Aki Food are businesses. They just happen to be nonprofit businesses. We do a way better job than the businesses that government's currently hiring, either because we hire local workers, the capacities in the community, as Darcy's saying, or because we do things differently. Instead of diesel fuel, we've got renewable energy. But I see Esther has a question. And you're from Dauphin.
Yes.
Okay,
Um,
hello.
Hello. Thank you for taking my question. I was wondering if you could delineate the difference between a cooperative and a social enterprise. Thank you.
Sure. A co-op, many co-ops can be defined as social enterprises. There's an overlap. What's the Federated Co-op is a massive oil and gas company that's headquartered not too far from you in Saskatchewan. I would not call them a social enterprise. I mean, in theory, they're controlled by, different businesses that are also co-ops that are controlled by consumers, but they're not controlled by the community. But I see someone here from Wolfville, Nova Scotia. There's a social enterprise there. It's something to do with fair trade coffee, just coffee or something like that. And I think they're a co-op. I would call just us. I was almost got it. So they're a co-op, and I would call them a social enterprise. But not all co-ops are social enterprises. To be a social enterprise, you need to be controlled by the community, and you need to be working on a social problem using market tools. Good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the question in the chat. Jen wrote, such a power imbalance between Southern Canada and Northern Canada. How may political parties work to address this imbalance?
Darcy might have a different answer than me, but we live in Winnipeg. 20% of Winnipeg is Indigenous. So to me, the problem is somewhat north-south, but it's probably more the huge void between how governments engage nonprofits and First Nations. So why are there 6,000 social enterprises in Scotland? Because you can't get a government contract in Scotland, a major government contract, unless you're working with a social enterprise. That the Prime Minister, the cabinet, it's embedded in how they do business, and it puts power into the nonprofit and social enterprise sector. But here in Canada, we haven't made that twist yet. So, but Darcy, did you being a chief of the Garden Hill First Nation, also you've worked in Ottawa, you've worked in political organizations in Winnipeg. How would you address that for Jen? Like, is there a difference in how governments treat North and South?
Well, I was thinking about that question. How can I tone it down? Because I always, as a political person, when I was chief, it was like pretty grueling trying to make that happen. So I think we're always trying to empower individuals, and we have to. We also have to bring in the right people to be in wherever there may be have influence within the government, and we've seen that with our good friend Elijah Harper at one point in time. So, but it has been initially growing up. We've made a lot of strides and have more or less gaining that power, but there still needs to be a lot of work to be done at all levels. It is a very complicated question. It could be, and no answer is there's no magic answer to that. It's just finding ways, because individuals in northern communities have their own thoughts and ideas what it may look like, but then having influenced by southern thought as well. So I try and live and try and work in a certain way to make it more, I guess, more understandable to individuals. So it's a roundabout way saying that's a complex question that don't have an answer.
Yeah, like if it was only a north-south issue, then Winnipeg's North End would not be struggling, or Southern First Nations would not be struggling. So it's really much more about how governments are engaging. Like child welfare, there are more Indigenous kids in care in Manitoba than there ever were in residential schools at one time. But the more kids there are in care, the more money child welfare agencies get. But if First Nations work on family reunification, they get less money because there's fewer kids in care. So we need to have money moving towards solutions rather than managing problems.
Thank you very much. It's been so wonderful to have you here and to actually hear from you and hear a little bit more about the story. For the folks out there who haven't read An Army of Problem Solvers, this is what. Oh, of course it doesn't. I'll share. I'll share the. I'll share it with you in the email that I send out. But that book was actually gifted to me when I went to do my Master of Environment at the University of Waterloo, and my supervisor Bob Gibson at the time gave me this idea, gave me the book, and he said, I think this is really going to help you. And so what I was studying at the time was food and churches and how having um, having a healthy source of food. So I mean, you're talking about the diabetes and in the community and growing your own food, perhaps even with fewer chemicals on them, and everything's all about bringing health to the community through the food, and that's very much related to what I was studying in a community development model as well. And oh, there you go. Sean posted a link so you can get the book directly from him. But it was like chapter 6, I believe it was, it was all on food. And I remember reading about it and thinking like, just wow. And it's such a wonderful model because it does it's very community oriented. And after reading the Serviceberry, we're talking about storing meat in the belly of our brother, and it's all about community, helping each other, standing up for each other. It relates so much to Jubilee, where we're trying to make everything a little bit more even for everybody and sort that out again. And so yeah, it's just so wonderful and a really, really, really good model of community development as well. So I mean, if community development is something that you do in your church even, I highly recommend start with this book. There's a lot of good ones, but it'll really, really give you a good idea of getting out there in the community and helping, because each community is going to have its own unique issues and its own unique demographics as well. So it's so helpful to know your community and understand how you can work with the folks there that to make sure that everybody has a good chance. I was going to do breakout rooms today, but I think I allowed us some time to chat instead. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen very briefly, and I'm going to show you the word cloud that we made from last week. Oh, too many windows open. All right, so there is our word cloud from last week. Hopefully you see that lovely little tree that we had made, because we were talking about the environment and ecology last week, and we were talking about how everything is related, how, you know, the animals and the plants and the air and the water, it's all living. And so these are your own words for the people that attended session 2 of how that impacted them and their thoughts from that. And so I am going to ask Shannon to put up our poll for this week, and we will make one final word cloud that we will share on social medias as well. And I will also make sure to share that with you in the email that I send out with all the links for the 3 videos that everybody will get. So yeah, briefly summarize what this webinar has meant for you. Did you learn something? Did something inspire you? How did it make you feel? And I've allowed you for a short answer there. So I believe if you click on the picture of the birds, it should allow you to answer below the birds. So you'll have to scroll down just a little bit and do that. Oh, look at that. It's actually letting me do it today because I handed over the reins to Shannon. So it actually let me answer this week. I'm not going to, but I want all of your answers because I know what my thoughts are. Shannon, you'll have to let me know when everybody's had a chance to answer it because I already closed it.
Here I was talking to you without my mic. 13 people have out of 36, and they're coming in steady. So another minute or 2.
Well, while people are finishing that up, did you want to prop up our Jubilee campaign at all?
Absolutely. So most of you have heard about Jubilee for 3 weeks in a row, but I'm going to give you some reminders. And one of my colleagues is going to pop some things into the chat. So after you've done your word cloud piece, if you would think about what's in the chat, we would all appreciate it. So petition signatures are still trickling in, and we think that most of our core KAIROS community has signed the Jubilee petition. And I'm imagining that most of you on this call have signed the Jubilee petition. So the next ask is, who of your neighbors, who of your community? Cheryl told us a great story this morning of getting her hairdresser to sign her petition, and her hairdresser agreed to take a paper petition and get other customers or others in her community to sign the petition. And I would invite you to think about doing the same. Who in your community would be aligned with the Jubilee justice that the petition is calling for? If you want to know more about the campaign overall, switching up the order, so you'll find the right link. We have an overarching link, and there you will find the Animators Toolkit if you want resources that are just quick to take to your church or community meeting. We've made some things easily accessible. If you want a deep dive, you could go into the resources. There's videos of our global partners. There's all kinds of different pieces. We'd like you to consider organizing a rally on June 15th, the day that the G7 summit starts in Canada. And so we have heard all kinds of things about how we would like governments to act differently. June 15th, let the federal government in Canada and in the strongest economies around the world hear your voice, gather a few friends, make a few signs, meet in a prominent place, take some pictures, put it on social media. We can all have our voices heard. And if you'd like to learn more about Jubilee, or if you could support others to learn more about Jubilee, come to the People's Forum in Calgary where collectively we will be close to the G7 and we'll be putting our voices out there. We have excellent subsidies for students, just $75 for the weekend for them. And recently we have learned that the Lois Wilson Fund of the Student Christian Movement in the World, Christian Student Federation, will fund students for their travel and their accommodations, making it very affordable to send students. Could you help us find the students who would be interested in this Jubilee campaign? That's like the 18 to 30-year-olds, the university and college students. Or could you support adults to come to the Jubilee Forum? And then either students or adults to come back to your community and share more of what they've learned about the kind of economies, the kind of reciprocal, abundant economies that we want to see. So I would encourage you to take a look at those links, to think about what is your next step in being part of the Jubilee movement.
Thank you so much, Shannon.
I'm going to end this poll now.
All righty, perfect. Right. So just before Darcy closes us in a good way, I just want to take a quick moment, and I want to thank all my guest speakers that we had over the course of the last 3 weeks. Sabrina Shawana, and we had Brianna Brown, and then today Elder Darcy Wood and Sean Loney. And so thank you to our speakers. Thank you to my Jubilee team that has been here to help support me along the way as I facilitate this book study, and for allowing me to have this this little opportunity to share the Serviceberry with you all. So thank you so much for coming. It means so much to me to see you all here. And over to you, Darcy.
Thank you all for providing this venue for us to be able to talk about our where we started, and it's been a while since we did a something like this. Grew quite a bit, but thank you all, and they were all good questions, and hopefully that I'm sure you'll share those little poll there with us. Interesting to see. And with that, let's close off, and I'm hoping that everybody got some inspiration, some thoughts that can be able to contribute to whatever it is that you're trying. Thank you for your time.
I wish you all a good night. We're just ending a few minutes early, but
Yeah.
thank you. We will see you all again, I'm sure.